is here.
Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king of Durin's folk, king under the mountain, Thorin Oakenshield. This was the dwarf who led the company of his followers to reclaim the Lonely Mountain from Smaug the dragon, as told in The Hobbit. And, spoilers here of course, Thorin does not make it out of the other end of our tale to rule over the realm that he has won back for his kin. But what if he did? What if Thorin had lived to fight another day, lived to eat another meal, lived to fulfill his full destiny of ruling as the king under the mountain? Well, sit back with your feet up in front of a burning fire as we dive into this today.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Remember everyone, if you find this video helpful, informative, or entertaining today, please remember to hit that subscribe button below. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on any of our latest videos, and you'll be supporting us to continue creating great content like this. Let's explore the potential changes that could have occurred in The Lord of the Rings had Thorin Oakenshield survived the quest of Erebor. Firstly, it's important to note that Thorin was relatively old for a dwarf at the time of his death. During the events of The Hobbit, Thorin was already 195 years old, which wasn't a problem in itself. However, considering that dwarves of the Third Age typically lived to be somewhere between 200 and 250 years old, it is reasonable to assume that his continued existence could have influenced the War of the Ring and subsequent saga through decisions or actions made in his final years rather than during the war itself, which could have had an impact on Dwarven society. For instance, if Thorin had survived, the recapture of Moria by Balin and his companions might have altered not only the circumstances surrounding the Council of Elrond, but also the entire Fellowship's journey through Moria too. Speaking of which, if you haven't seen our recent video explaining why Gimli was unaware of Balin's fate in Moria, then please be sure to check that out. Links of course will be in the description below. It is unlikely that Thorin's survival would have extended to that time of the War of the Ring, like I said, as Frodo didn't leave the Shire until 77 years after the Battle of Five Armies. Nevertheless, we will now discuss the potential implications of Thorin's survival during that time.
This is no chance meeting, is it, Gandalf?
No.
Thorin Oakenshield was born in 2746 of the Third Age to Thrain II. His grandfather Thror was a revered ruler and king of Durin's folk along with his son and then, hopefully, Thorin as well. At the age of 24, Thorin personally witnessed the destructive power of the dragon Smaug when an attack resulted in the tragic loss of many of his kin. This calamity forced the dwarves to abandon their ancestral home, enduring a challenging life in foreign lands. Following in his father's footsteps, Thorin exhibited traits reminiscent of his father's determination. Thorin's father had assembled an army to seek vengeance for the death of his own father, Thror. The goal was to reclaim the ancient kingdom of the dwarves, Khazad-dûm, which was then under the rule of the orc leader Azog. The name Oakenshield was bestowed upon Thorin after the Battle of Azan-ul-Bizar, during which he valiantly defended himself using an oak branch after his shield shattered. However, due to Dain Ironfoot's discovery of Durin's Bane, these dwarves were compelled to relocate to the Blue Mountains despite their victory. It was in this new dwelling that they enjoyed an improved quality of life, thanks in large part to their extensive efforts in mining precious metals such as iron and gold. Unfortunately, this pursuit of wealth eventually consumed Thorin's father, leading to his demise. Driven by an unyielding desire to reclaim the Lonely Mountain and its forgotten treasures, Thorin's father fell into the clutches of Sauron on his attempted journey home and was imprisoned in Dol Guldur. There, he languished until Gandalf discovered him. Thrain entrusted Gandalf with a map and a key before his passing in that wretched place. His imprisonment had driven him to the point of losing his own identity, and Gandalf departed without actually knowing the true identity of this dwarf at that time that he had managed to stumble across. Thorin proved to be an exemplary ruler while presiding over the Blue Mountains, and his realm flourished under his leadership. The longing to return to and reclaim the Lonely Mountain consumed Thorin, indicating that if he had survived, Balin's folk would likely have become an extension of Thorin's own people. Consequently, his ultimate fate might have been determined in that context rather than during the final battle depicted in The Hobbit. While crafting The Hobbit, Professor Tolkien initially did not envision Thorin's death in the final battle. The idea of Thorin meeting his demise came to the Professor during the course of writing the story and was not predetermined from the beginning of the character's adventure. Nonetheless, Tolkien ultimately made the decision for Thorin to perish as a noble warrior, embodying what the Professor referred to as Northern courage. Interestingly, in the initial concept of the story, Tolkien had not planned to depict the Battle of the Five Armies at all, and instead intended to present a peaceful resolution to the conflicts between different peoples. As such, the king under the mountain, Thorin, would have played a significant role in this harmonious resolution. Thorin's character was heavily influenced by Scandinavian mythology, particularly drawn upon the themes of independence that were prominent in Norse mythology itself. It was from this inspiration that Tolkien derived the concept of Northern courage, which became a defining trait of Thorin's character. Scholars have found a number of connections between Thorin's character and the mythology of the ancient past, not least of all the cursed treasure that can cause its owner to lose all notion of who they are, with the dragon sickness reflecting this. In his early life as ruler in the Blue Mountains, Thorin was an energetic and proud leader, which led to the prosperity of his folk. The translation for his name from Old Norse is Daring Man, and adopted from an often referenced collection of sagas known as Eddic songs, which comes from us in the form of the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda. These myths give flavour and a unique antiquity to the modern mythology Professor Tolkien created, giving it both a timelessness and timeliness that continues to inspire and enthrall readers and viewers alike. This means that the Thorin that was conceived by Professor Tolkien would accept death as a warrior in his final battle. As we mentioned briefly earlier, the original intention was for Thorin to live, but on a slight side note here, it might be interesting for you to know that his original name was different as well, and it might sound familiar to you all. Gandalf. Yes, Gandalf the Wandering Wizard almost had a different name, and we could have had Gandalf Oakenshield instead. But anyway, regarding the fate of Erebor and the kingship, it is reasonable to assume that despite Thorin's later affliction with dragon sickness, there is no evidence to suggest he would have been a poor ruler. Similarly, we lack information indicating that Dain, who succeeded Thorin, was an inadequate king either. If we take a look at one quick example of how events could have subtly changed had Thorin survived, it is reasonable to speculate that his presence might have altered the representation of the dwarves of Erebor at the Council of Elrond as an early factor in the story. Thorin's hands-on and dominant personality might have made him less likely to delegate such tasks, and he could have insisted on personally representing all the dwarves, given his concern for the mission to reclaim Moria. This is, of course, if he was still alive due to age, and if he was mobile enough at that old age too. This decision would have had long-term implications, including the significant friendship between Legolas and Gimli potentially never happening, which played a crucial role in shaping the future of their respective peoples, although it is hard to say Gimli would still not have been the one to be in the Fellowship anyway. Another potential scenario, if Thorin had survived, is that he would have personally led that mission to reclaim the ancient home of the dwarves instead of Balin. Considering Thorin's success in reclaiming one home, it is not far-fetched to imagine him undertaking this new quest as well. However, it is difficult to envision a significantly different outcome. It is likely that the people would have simply heard about Thorin's expedition rather than Balin's expedition, with a similar outcome of the expedition going silent. The events involving the Council of Elrond and subsequent events might have played out much the same with this as well. Perhaps others would have been more determined to seek answers if Thorin had led this quest, but it is uncertain if this would have resulted in substantial changes. It is possible that the dwarves' presence at the Council of Elrond would have been motivated by an increasing number of dwarves going missing while visiting Moria, rather than the initial silence of communications. To consider another aspect of his prolonged life and its potential effect on the outcome after The Hobbit, Thorin himself would have lived to continue his friendship with Bilbo, and despite their continued bickering, he would have hopefully had the wisdom to realise that despite their animosity, the people of Dale and the elves of Thranduil were still better treated as allies than foes as well. They might have continued to have their disagreements, but would have realised that their continued alliance was the best for everyone. This continued life of Thorin would have delayed the kingship of Dain as well. The king under the mountain was not married though, so as such, Dain Ironfoot would become the next king under the mountain regardless, most likely before the time of the War of the Ring taking place. But during those years before his death, as a charismatic and influential leader, Thorin might have played a pivotal role in uniting the dwarves and rallying them against Sauron's forces. His strategic insights and determination could have altered the outcome of key battles if he had a longer time as king to influence his folk. Again, I am not saying Dain was in any way a bad ruler, but there was something special about Thorin that it was a shame that he never got to live out his true potential.
Hey, cousin! What took you so long?
So, there we have it. We have explored the character development and broader impact of Thorin Oakenshield. His pride and strength made him a formidable presence in the world, regardless of whether he lived on or not. His untimely death at the peak of his popularity ensured his legacy as a courageous dwarf, securing his redemption at that moment. This is an important lesson from Professor Tolkien that applies even to our own time. Judging others based solely on their weakest moments is unfair, as we are all a mix of good and bad. Characters like Thorin allow us to connect with the inhabitants of Middle-earth, understanding their struggles, mourning their losses, celebrating their victories, and empathizing with their failures. However, it is unlikely that Thorin would have been alive during the events of The Lord of the Rings, simply due to his age. He would have been over 270 years old at this point, with most dwarves only living between 200 and 250 years. It is really hard to say that he would have still been there, and even if he had, he would have been far too old to be an influence. Nevertheless, the influence he could have had in the years leading up to it would have likely been positive. Thorin would have maintained strong relationships with other races, served as a great leader in Erebor, and potentially altered the entire course of the mission to retake Moria. Given his wisdom, he might have dissuaded Balin from embarking on that ill-fated quest, or even led it himself. But at the end of the day, it is hard to say that if Thorin had survived, much of anything bad would have come of it at all.
We are sons of Durin, and Durin's folk do not flee from a fight.
With that now though, it is time for my question of the day, which is, how do you think things would have gone if Thorin had survived? What do you think may have played out different, or what do you think would have just ended up simply the same? Let me know all your thoughts and theories on this in the comment section down below. And now to shout out our patrons. You guys have been amazing in supporting our short film project. We have got some amazing updates coming soon. We are really making good progress, and I cannot thank you all enough. We have the Divine Power tier member of Kevin, the Fire Demon tier member of Nashith, and the Wizard Staff tier members of John, Andrew, and Hunter. You are all true legends of the Brohirrim. Finally, I really appreciate your time in watching this video today. If you've enjoyed the content, please consider hitting that subscribe button and the bell icon with notifications enabled, so that you will get notified when all future videos are released. Thank you once again for your support, and I look forward to seeing you next time on The Broken Sword.